It's peak redraft season, and we're here to look at some ADP fades and alternatives. In this episode, Jake and I dive into the IDP Show ADP to identify 10 early picks in IDP drafts that we are passing on. Along the way, we'll explain why we're not buying these players at current market values and suggest some alternatives that you should consider instead. Welcome to IDP Drafts. All right, welcome in, Jake. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm always excited to talk ball. I'm always a little hesitant to fade players, right? Because everyone's always valid choice at the right cost. So that's where we put those two thoughts together here tonight to say, okay, these guys maybe just aren't right at their value as to how we see things today. So excited to kind of talk through some of that. And I got my logic, but I'm really, really excited to hear how you view some of these things and kind of maybe take some of that to my home league draft this Sunday. So
I'm an eternal optimist. I'm a nice guy. So doing fades also feels weird to talk about. Yeah, this guy's overvalued, especially since I think most, if not all, of our fades are top 50 picks in IDP drafts. So these are all good players. We're not doing super deep dives where, this 240th player, that's a terrible pick. Here's this other guy instead. We're staying near the top. The state of IDP data shows the depth of a lot of IDP leagues where, it's sort of that 5 to 10 range is the overwhelming majority of leagues, especially redraft leagues that are getting ready to get fired up or drafting as we speak. So let's talk about some of the big names. And you start us off with some really big names in the IDP space.
You got to get spicy, right? So, and that's what I tried to do here a little bit, at least. So, first one for me, Roquan Smith. He's going with an ADP of around 11.7 per the ADP draft data we have here, and all the best balls with the IDP show. Again, he hasn't massively underperformed, or there's these big red flags. But when we're looking what's around him, I think we have some opportunity here to try and extract a little more value. We look at his last two seasons, both under 240 points, and that 220 to 240 range is really, that's the minimum floor I'm looking for out of a performer when we're talking about first round, early second round type of player. And again, this is all per IDP big three scoring. But again, 239 last year, 210 the year before, both times outside the top 12 overall for IDP. His sacks are down while the pass rush attempts are up. Is that a factor within the defensive scheme, the way they're using him? If he's doing that, that means a lot of pass rush attempts generally tend to mean lower tackle efficiency. His tackle floor has been stable. Snaps are stable. Again, he's a solid pick. I just don't think, based on how he's utilized, what he's shown us in this defensive scheme, I don't see the elite upside to take him inside the top 12 to make him that first round pick. And he's going to come into this year. The defensive coordinator situation is stable. Maybe that's an argument for a little bit of a boost, but we saw, Mike McDonald roll out what he did over into Seattle, and we saw great value for the linebackers there. I don't know that Zach Orr is going to unlock something, that Roquan hasn't already had in his 6-year career. So is there a range of outcomes where he becomes a top 12 performer again? I think that's possible because of who his talent is and what he's shown us he can do. I just think it's a much smaller percentage than what we're used to seeing. So with that, I would rather pivot to someone like Fred Warner, linebacker for the 49ers. Probably don't need to tell you guys that one. But you look at his last two seasons, he had a 229 season, so a little bit lower, but he also had hit 272 as recent as the last 2 years as well. And those are the type of numbers that they're going to push you over the top, give you that little bit of edge, which maybe doesn't seem like a lot. It's 30 points up from that 240, but spread that out over, a full season, you're averaging almost 2 full points more per game. You look at that defense, they lost Dre Greenlaw. They have Nick Martin, they have D Winters. There's a lot of uncertainty there. I think there's an opportunity for Fred Warner to vacuum up some of that, and as such keep his floor stable and push him into that layer of performance that we're looking for. I'm really looking for here. I do also wonder what the offense looks like, right? Everyone talks about the strength of schedule and they should do so great and all these things. Well, I mean, they're already down like 16 running backs, and Brandon Ayuk's not coming back until 2028. Like, there's all this negativity around energy, injuries. There we go, Jake. um, the thing that's consistent there is going to be the defense. It's going to be Fred Warner, and he's going to perform for us. I feel much more comfortable taking Fred Warner with Robert Saleh supporting him there at the price he's going at here, end of the first round over Roquan.
Yeah, so I'll push back on a few of your decisions here this evening, but this is not one of them. So I love this for three reasons. One, it's you finally coming over to the dark side and admitting that drafting LB early, because we didn't lock into, hey, if we're saying pass on LB, who's the LB replacement? I tended to do that, but I know you didn't every time. You did a lot of positional swaps, and here you stuck with the LB. So I like to see that I'm finally getting through to you after an entire offseason of telling you linebacker early is my preferred strategy.
Like any good marriage, we're just starting to become more like each other, right? And so here I am, linebacker aficionado, Jake.
The second thing I like about this is, you're right at that turn. So if you look at Roquan Smith's ADP is 11.7, Fred Warner's is 14.6, you can pass on Smith, actually take an edge if you want to get an edge here. And then when you're coming back at 201, 202, Fred Warner is most often there. So not only do you like Warner more, but you don't necessarily have to take him in Roquan's spot because of where it falls in the actual draft itself. And then the third thing, I was at the Fantasy Football Expo up in Canton last weekend, and I attended the IDP panel because it's what you do. And I think the last question they had was who they expected to lead the league in tackles. Not a single person mentioned Roquan Smith, but there was one or possibly even two Fred Warners. So I think that I love this take. I have Warner back when D-Up was still going. I had Warner a spot ahead of Roquan, and I took Warner a lot more frequently than Roquan. So like this pick a lot. All right. My first ADP fade is one that hopefully won't get me kicked off of this chair for when I come back next week or in 2 weeks when we wrap up the season of IDP drafts, because I know he is a beloved character in the Sode Shack, not just because of his phenomenal hair, but his phenomenal production and the fact that he won a lot of folks their leagues last year. But I am still fading Andrew Van Ginkel of the Minnesota Vikings. Yes, I said it. I am fading Andrew Van Ginkel at his ADP. So his ADP is 12.1. So just barely behind Roquan Smith, who you just got done talking about. There are a lot of warning signs to me flashing about AVG. I would love to get him later. I am not taking him in the first round. I did not take him in the first round in a single D-Up draft when they were going on. I have not taken him as a top 12 player in any of our combined IDP and offense drafts or any of the IDP only drafts I've done with Harms and the rest of the fellows over there. The warning signs to me are plentiful. First, Dallas Turner was the 17th overall pick in last year's draft. You're going to want to see what he has. I know that his snap share went down late in the season and Van Ginkel's went up, but it's also because the Vikings were in playoff contention and needed every last confident snap that they could get. And so it made sense that they would go with a veteran over a rookie. Turner played only 300 snaps last year. I cannot imagine that stays the same in 2025. AVG had a career year in 2024, which is phenomenal. But the thing that I found really interesting, and I haven't heard many people talk about it, is he parlayed that career year into a 1-year extension. And if he was 34, 35 years old, that would make some sense to me. He just turned 30. So he is not old by edge standards, and he was only able to get one more year in his deal, which also makes him feel like more of a transitional player that might be able to go down in snaps a little bit as Turner emerges. The other thing that I'll mention is he is due for negative regression. He was getting 1 sack for every 4 pressures. The league average, as we talked about last episode, was 1 sack for every 6 pressures among edges. So he was way below average. He was closer to average at 6.6 back in 23. So even if he returns to that form, that's losing 4 or 5 sacks from his portfolio and making him not worthy of being a top 12 pick. On the other hand, his teammate, Jonathan Grenard, is due for positive regression. Again, if you listen to our data-driven drafting last episode, you heard us talk a little bit about how Grenard had 7.63 pressures for every sack, which was not good. It was way above league average, and his underlying metrics, other than that, were great. So it suggests that that was very fluky and is going to be moving the other direction. So while I expect Van Ginkel's sack count to go down, Grenard's sacks should be going up. And while I expect Van Ginkel's snaps might be a little bit shakier, I don't see that with Grenard because he is locked up through 2027. I know they have some outs coming up, but they are expensive outs in the funny money world of the salary cap. Take it for what you will. But still, I don't see Grenard as being the person who sacrifices snaps so that Dallas Turner can play. Give me Grenard at an ADP of 19.6 over Andrew Van Ginkel at 12.1. And honestly, if both were sitting there somehow at pick 19 or 20 in a draft, I would still go Grenard over Van Ginkel. But again, I know this is going to be blasphemy to some. I like Van Ginkel. I'm not just jealous of the hair because of my follicle situation up top, but he is not the guy that I am drafting at that price in any of my redraft or best ball leagues.
Yeah, I'm actually fully aligned with you. You look at what Andrew Van Ginkel's done over the last 2 seasons, amazing stuff. Don't want to take anything away from that. You talked about regression too, just from the sack numbers. He has 3 defensive touchdowns returned or interceptions returned for a touchdown over the last 2 years as well.
Mm-hmm.
As much as I'd love to say, oh, he had 1 2 years ago, he had 2 this last year. Now he's going to have 3. Like we all know that's not how this works, right? And I think that there's a very strong chance that that big play percentage that we talked about, interceptions are very unstable for guys who are constantly in coverage in our safeties and cornerbacks. I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's a lot less stable for defensive ends who spend most of their time rushing the passer. Now I know Ginkel did drop into coverage a lot more because of his skill set and how Flores does that and how he runs his cover zero front and they, guys are dropping and blah, blah, blah. But I'm pretty confident he's not going to repeat that type of performance, along with all the other regression candidate or possibilities you laid out there as well. So I'm locked in with you on this one. And Grenard was a Houston Texan. They grew him up, and he showed extreme efficiency. And I always thought, man, this isn't going to work out. Well, now he got a full complement of snaps, and all he did was show he can deliver consistent pressure and consistent, sack numbers to the quarterback as well. So, yeah, I'm with you on this one.
Yeah, and your next fade is someone else who might be due for a little bit of regression, especially in terms of points, given some of the crazy plays that he made last year. But tell us why you're fading Nik Bonnito and why Edgerrin Cooper feels like a better play.
Yeah. Again, this will probably get me, canceled too. Nik Bonnito, I know he is a fan favorite among many in the IDP show chat, as well as a lot of the listeners. And I'm a big fan of what he did last year too, and the year before that coming up. Like he's really grown his way into a top end pass rusher. He's earned this. You saw it. He earned career high in snaps last year. But the thing that kind of disappointed me is he kept growing in one area of his game, but didn't grow in all areas of it. And so we saw that huge jump in snaps, but he really only increased his tackle force slightly, 6 more tackles than the previous season. We also look and see what he's done in that system and who's running that system in Vance Joseph. He has historically over the last 4 or 5 years, I want to say it was 4 back to 2021, he doesn't have these pass rushers who go out and give 800 to 850 plus snaps consistently, right? Like Jonathan Cooper got really close in that range. I think he was like 820 or something. But in all the years past to that, he likes to have his stable. He likes to run guys out there. He'll have guys that lead the pack, and Nik Bonnito is likely to give us 700 to 750 snaps again. But if we know that ceiling's already capped there, and then we pair that with, we look at, he came off an extremely efficient year, right? 15 sacks on 57 pressures. We would have expected that to be closer to 10 and a half.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we assume that kind of regression, which again, outliers happen, but I think it's a safe bet to look at it this way. I just don't see a limited tackle floor that's not growing with his snap usage, vastly overperforming his sack performance in a single season. Those two things aligning, Vance Joseph's utilization of edges, I just don't see this all of a sudden becoming something where he's going to hit this huge ceiling. And I think that's where we're drafting him at. We're drafting him at his ceiling. And that's where the game gets a little dangerous, right? And so if we want to take and flip the script a little bit, well, we got Edgerrin Cooper, right? And here I am going into linebackers again. Everybody hold on. But we talked about him recently, I think during our one of our fast draft episodes. I mean, this guy got his chance to start at the end of the year, and all he did was grab a hold of it with both hands, and he did not let go. In those weeks 16 through 18, what did he do for us? He gave us 14 and a half points, 24.25 points, and 12.25 points. So those were his regular season finish without Quay Walker in there. And I think I talked about this last time, but the thing that gets me excited is that's his floor. He did not have a single sack, maybe he had one pass deflection, but I know he didn't have a single sack or a single interception. Like I said, maybe one pass deflection. This is all the work he generated as a tackler and just getting after the ball and being around the ball. That's it. Mm-hmm. Now you're telling me that's this guy's floor. And again, I get it. He's not going to give us 20 plus points a game is what I'm calling out here. But I'm saying he has such a stable floor at that point. He has shown chops as a pass rusher, playmaker in coverage, getting after a loose ball, whatever it is. If I can take that as my baseline and now I can just add on top of that, well, now again, I'm looking at a guy whose baseline is 220 to 240. I'm getting that at the end of the second round. And I'm saying, hey, that people are drafting Roquan, and that's like his performance. That's his range, 220 to 240. Now I'm getting him a whole round later. Like, I'm going to take that over a guy who I think is being drafted at a ceiling in Nik Bonnito. And I'm going to take that stable floor and shoot for upside.
Mm-hmm. I'm a big Bonnito fan, but I'm not coming at you with a pitchfork because I was looking up my fast draft ADP. And again, D-up is done, but you can still look at your portfolio. You can look at some really great things. And one of the things I absolutely love about the fast draft platform is you can see your personal ADP. So not just your exposure, but where you drafted them. I have 18.2% exposure to Nik Bonnito, but my ADP for Bonnito was 31.2. So almost 10 rounds later than he's being picked across these drafts that we're looking at here tonight, which I think is up to 16 drafts. So not a small number of drafts that this ADP is pulled from. And it's from lots of loyal listeners out there. So it's a lot of sharp people who are doing these drafts. So even though Bonnito, especially in like a best ball format, has a lot of that upside, I think that we're definitely drafting at ceiling rather than at the more likely range of outcomes. So give me a linebacker in that spot who is going to get those consistent points. Again, I love linebacker early. It dries up, especially if you're in a true position league where most teams only have 1.5 viable linebackers, whereas you're using 4 or 5 defensive linemen who can get you points week in, week out. So no disagreement there on at ADP. As much as I like Bonnito, I wouldn't be paying that price either. And you have officially turned me around and sold me on Edgerrin Cooper, who I still have little shares of, but I'm trying to rectify that with every draft that I'm in. So I'm calling for a fade of Frankie Luvu in favor of Edgerrin Cooper, who you just described. So Luvu is someone who I am overweight on in fast draft. I have him in about 20% of my leagues, and my ADP was around 18. So I was drafting him even ahead of this group's ADP. So this is one place where I would say this group is closer to right and I'm wrong. And I think this group is still a little overgassed on Luvu's performance, especially in the first half of last season. So if you listen to our last episode about data-driven drafting, you heard Frankie Luvu come up a lot. You heard him come up a lot in negative aspects. So a quick recap, 3 areas that he showed up in when we were talking about tackles versus expected, and he was the league leader in tackles under expected. So based on how many snaps he should have had way more tackles. And sometimes we think of that as a great positive regression candidate, but his underlying metrics suggest that tackling just may not be what he excels at in the role that he's in there in Washington. We also looked at metrics that correlate with fantasy outcomes. And so we looked at PFF grades. All 3 of his relevant PFF grades that were significantly correlated with performance were under 65. So you don't want to be in that sort of range of outcomes. We talked about those when we looked at Patrick Queen's numbers as someone who might get replaced midseason. Now, again, I don't think either one of us think that Luvu is at risk there, but that's another sign that this is a riskier play. And then finally, we looked at alignments and box snaps versus non-box snaps among linebackers. And Luvu was among the top 10 of all tacklers at linebacker in terms of their percentage of snaps not played in the box, because he got a decent number of D-line snaps, I believe it was. Great for his unstable sack output, not so great for that floor that we want in linebackers. So I think part of the reason I was a little overweight on him in D up, and I think that the market that we're pulling this ADP from is a little too rich for my blood, has to do with the fact that these are best ball contests. In a redraft, I am running away from Frankie Luvu because he is the kind of person who I don't want to guess those weeks he's going to have a splash play. I would much rather have Edgerrin Cooper because, like you said, stable floor. We haven't seen the upside yet, so all that's baked in. I mentioned I was at the Expo. He was getting a lot of buzz at the Expo as someone who could really emerge and become a new LB1 next year. And again, if you look at PFF grades, he was a full 20 points higher last year, and that's a non-trivial amount. So give me Edgerrin Cooper over Frankie Luvu, being drafted very comparably, 22.7 to 24.7. I would take Cooper. And again, this is sort of at that 2-3 turn. And if you're not doing 3rd round reversal, which we don't really do much unless we're talking like super flex leagues usually, then this could be a place where you could take another position at the end of the 2nd and then kick off the start of the 3rd with an Edgerrin Cooper and walk away with what I expect to potentially even be a better player in 2025.
I mean, I don't have to sell you, right? Or you don't have to sell me on Edgerrin Cooper.
No,
I
you
kind of
already
agree with
sold
that.
me.
You're
So,
right. You're right.
yeah.
But what's fun for me is I agree with all the regression because again we talked about it ad nauseum. But just a fun thing, I didn't realize Frankie Luvu was number 70 overall in the players ranking of top 100 for going into the 2025 season. Like I thought he had a great year. He really showed out a couple years back in Carolina, kind of doing the same thing, right? His pass rushing chops really putting him over the top and making him a big name. But man, I did not realize that his peers thought of him as the 70th best player in all of the NFL. So it's interesting because like the PFF grades, like you talk about, and the correlation, and then hearing that, right, like from true ball knowers to players, I guess, right. So it's just a funny thing. I'm totally in alignment with you, but it's just kind of one of those things I wanted to throw out there.
Maybe he's just a hell of a guy. And so people are giving him the benefit of the doubt, want to give him an attaboy because he came out of nowhere in Carolina.
Right.
I still remember passing on him in my waivers. I'm like, why is someone spending 15% of their budget on this Frankie Luvu guy? He's new.
Right.
We don't know. He has done way more than anyone ever expected of him.
Oh yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if maybe some of that ranking is look at what he's done relative to expectations, or again, like I said, he could just be that guy who picks up the tab when the players get together at the Pro Bowl, or just life of the party. Who knows? Who knows?
Right.
But not rooting against him, especially since I have about 20% exposure. But for these last drafts, as we finish off the off season, now that we're in redraft season, the last best balls that we do, I would rather have Cooper than Luvu, and that's even if I didn't have the Luvu exposure that I did.
I love it. Well, you know who is going to pick up the tab at all the events that they go to after getting a very healthy extension this offseason? That's linebacker for the Chiefs, Nik Bolton, who at ADP 36.6 is someone I'm going to pass on at this point. Now, I know some people, I feel like Nik Bolton is very polarizing. Like, I'm going to have like 50% of the crowd, like, yeah, this Jake guy, he knows what he's talking about. And the other half will be like, shut up, you idiot. Like,
well, at least 25% of that half would be Chiefs fans, and I'm sick of hearing from them anyway, so it's fine.
That's fair. But yeah, he had a fully healthy year finally, and what did he show us? He showed us his least efficient tackling season to date, which I feel like was his calling card when he came in. He was a very, very efficient tackler, which propped up a very wonderful floor for him. He did find a way to still output, near that 220 point total for us. So, okay, again, that's kind of that floor I'm looking for my top end linebackers. And well, why aren't you happy with that, Jake? Well, he propped it up with, he finally had some sack production, but he did it because he had 103 pass rush attempts, and his inability to generate pressure at the rate that I'd like to see there. And also the fact that I look at what what Steve Spagnuolo did with their linebackers this year. He had 3 different linebackers, off-ball linebackers, like true off-ball, with over 100 plus pass rush attempts. Like, they're clearly doing something with that defense schematically, where that's how they felt like they needed to use the guys to optimize their defense or stop whatever, they were trying to counter. And I don't know that there's been enough shift in the way things are played offensively in the NFL that if that worked for the Chiefs last year, which it did, they had a top tier defense. I'm guessing they're going to do a lot of that again. And if he's spending 1 out of every 10 snaps, 1 out of every 9 snaps rushing the passer and not generating the pressure we like to see to produce the big play numbers, all that's going to do is keep bringing down his tackle efficiency or keep it down. And for me, that gives me a lot of concern about where he could go moving forward. On top of that, he also had his worst missed tackle percentage to date too. Left 18 missed tackles out there on the field. Regression could return to the norm, and he could pick up a few more, and that could help out a little bit. A lot of things are trending in ways that I don't like, and utilizations are not ideal for me, especially when I can flip to someone who is much more secure in this type of role, and that would be Lavonte David. So he does not have the elite tackle floor that he used to have. Same thing, right? Like, this guy would soak up 150 tackles minimum, right? Like, that was just what it is. Now he's floating around basically the same tackle efficiency that we see from Nik Bolton in that mid 11% range, and even had more missed tackles out there on the field in 21. But he had 142 pass rush attempts, so even more. But he's consistently taken that and generated high amounts of pressures, which he's done and generated that into multiple sacks. So 9 out of his 13 seasons he's been playing, which kudos to that. I mean, we all know he's an elite and Hall of Famer, but just saying that out loud, 13 seasons and 9 of those multiple sacks, and the average of that entire 13-year career averaging over 3 sacks. Obviously, then there's seasons where, he had a 7 sack season one time. There was some where he had, like you said, less than 2, whatever. But it's like that ceiling is there. He's got Todd Bowles, who he's had success as a pass rushing off-ball linebacker with there since 2019, head coach in 2022, but he keeps all the defensive coordinator play calling. To me, Lavonte David is just so stable in what he's going to give there and still have so much confidence in his utilization for upside. That's the kind of pick I want there. Bolton feels like the guy who's like, yeah, there's a 50-50 chance he just returns the expected value. There's a 50% chance I think that Lavonte David goes above that. Maybe not 50, but like, 30, 40% just based on he can give me 5, 6, 7 sacks in a year. And to me, that's worth taking that upside there at that point because at this point, again, I'm still trying to maximize my value for my linebackers. I'm not trying to, look for full boom bust type players, even in a best ball format, when I got a guy who can give me a floor and the upside. So for me, I'm passing on Bolton. Give me the Hall of Famer. That's where I stand.
And I'm a pass on Bolton too. I've just never been a big Bolton guy. I know that he looks cool when he's out there on the field. I've watched him play a lot when he plays my Bengals or other folks, and he pops off the screen a decent bit when he does make plays, and kind of like DeMarvion Overshone. When you watch him play, you just like gravitate towards him when you're watching the actual games. And I think there are some things that work in his favor, like you mentioned the snap count. I think that AFC West is going to be one of the more run-heavy divisions in football, with Genty and in Vegas now, and the Chargers always wanting to, not always, but in this new regime, wanting to really establish the run, and Denver with their 4 to 5 to 7 headed running back feast, which I want no part of if we're talking about offense. So I think I can squint and find a path for drafting Bolton ahead of David here, but David's just done it so many times, and there's going to come a day when he doesn't, but people have been wrong last year and the year before that and the year before that, talking about, okay, we're fading Levante David for insert name here, who finished 20 to 30 spots behind David. So I'm much more of a David guy than a Bolton. I remember I got David in a bunch of the fast drafts in the 5th or 6th round, whereas Bolton was consistently going probably in the 3rd or 4th, if I'm remembering that correctly. So the ADP was even more of a gap in those leagues than in these. But yeah, I like Bolton more than I have in the past. Probably not as much as David, but I think this is one of the more interesting calls for me.
I'm glad I could intrigue you, Scott.
You have. My interest is piqued. And as the late round DB guy, I also wanted to pick your brain and get your reaction to my next fade, which are a mid and early round DB. I think we'd call him an early round DB. So suggesting fading an early round DB for a mid round DB. So Brian Branch is my fade, and Derwin James is the alternative that I would much rather have. And this one I'm going to keep relatively straightforward. Let's just look at some numbers. I'll acknowledge that Brian Branch is a stud. If all things were equal and I had Brian Branch or Derwin James both available to me at a value that I liked, I would take Branch over James every time. In Dynasty, I would much rather have Branch than James, given age, and because I think Branch is going to be a very good player for a very long time. However, if you look at some basic numbers, big 3 scoring points per game last year, Branch 16.2, James 13.1. So clear edge Branch gets you 3 more points per game, and even missed a game last year. So he doesn't miss a game. Who knows, that number may go up or down, but his total points number is going to go up. Big play dependency, which is something we also talked about in our last episode. Both are, about what you'd expect for a defensive back. Branch was at 47.7%, mostly due to interceptions and passes defended. James was at 46.6%, mostly due to sacks. So both big play guys, good tacklers, but all that risk that you kind of anticipate with DBs to begin with. PFF grades, 88.8 for Brian Branch to 83.7 for Derwin James, both still top 10 safeties last year. Snaps, 982 for Branch, again, missing a game, to 1059 for Derwin James. So I've basically just laid out all the reasons why Brian Branch is a better pick than Derwin James. But let's get to the last number, and that's ADP. The ADP for Brian Branch is 34.3, so late 3rd round. The ADP for Derwin James is 68.4, so we're talking 6th round at that point. I would much rather have another top 5 fantasy player, top 10 overall player. I would cost myself those 3 points in the difference between Branch and James in order to wait an additional 3 to 4 rounds to get my first DB. Honestly, the 6th is an early spot for me to be drafting DB in a lot of formats. But if I can get James in the 6th versus Branch in the 3rd, I will take James in the 6th every day and just scoop up value for DBs late. I feel like someone told me draft late round DBs once upon a time. But how does this one strike you? I have a feeling it gels with your general philosophy, but you might even say, "Hey, James is too high at that value," and I'd respect your opinion there too. What do you think of these DBs?
I mean, to me, I've loved Derwin James since he came in. The dude's amazing. Even power bombing Travis Kelce, right? I mean, he literally does it all. No, I mean, you're spot on with it. And to me, it comes down as simple to an exercise like this, right? Tell me what sounds better to you, right? You're going to draft Brian Branch, and then you're going to do Dre Greenlaw or George Karlaftis as your replacement for not taking Derwin James later. Now you take Derwin James later. Now you're looking at, now I can add Jamie and Sherwood or Jordan Brooks or heck, even Nik Bolton if you're so inclined. Which one of those sides sounds better to you in terms of an IDP best ball here that we're going with? I don't know to you. I mean, maybe call me biased or whatever, but it's an easy, like I want an upside of a Jamie and Sherwood, or heck, even a Nik Bolton versus, okay, well now I'm taking, a George Karlaftis, who it's like, yeah, he'll volume his way to relevance probably, or maybe even sniffs a 9-10 sack season. But I don't feel great about those outcomes. I feel way more confident about Jamie and Sherwood giving me 120 tackle floor, heck with 140, 150 outcome within his reach too. And I think he's got a lot to be unpacked there as well in terms of big play opportunities as he becomes more ingrained as the play caller and in that Jets defense. So when I just break it down in pure, hey, this is what the ADP is telling me.
Mm-hmm.
To me, what you've laid out is exactly where I'm going to lean every time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I like Branch. If this was something different, like an auction, if we were talking about auction values, and I could get them for the same amount of cash, I would rather have Branch than James.
Yeah.
But most leagues aren't like that. And I also understand and can empathize. I think we've talked before in a previous episode about some of my, we'll just call it what it is, laziness with setting lineups. So I love having 2 great defensive backs where I can just play them and not have to mess with them. I like streaming even more thanks to Johnny the Greek and all the work that he's done with corners, and I use that a lot for leagues where I am more locked in. But if I can just have a Brian Branch or a Derwin James, either of them check that box for me where I'm not going to be getting cute and looking at matchups and taking them out. So I would rather shore up a couple other spots. You mentioned some of the linebackers that you're passing on in those rounds, essentially, to be able to get Branch early. And linebackers get gross in a lot of 12-team leagues by round 6 when we're thinking about the IDP only. We're starting to get into the Jermaine Pratts of the world, a guy you're going to talk about who doesn't even have a job, got drafted at 69th overall in the most recent draft, or 67th overall in the most recent draft that was done, that was IDP only. So yeah, I teed you up there for what I feel like is the most controversial fade that we're going to have in this episode. Why should we not be drafting the outlaw Josey Jewell?
Right. I felt so bad picking him because it does feel so cheap. Like he literally got cut by the Panthers, what, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago now? Maybe even longer.
It's been a minute, yeah.
Yeah, maybe 4 weeks. It might have been like the July 20 or something. Anyways, but yeah, like I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna just look and see here, right? Because no one's drafted him ever since the news. Nope, people are still either disconnected and or there's the hopium there to say, well, he's coming back or he's gonna land wherever, right? We've been saying that about Eric Kendricks. We've been asking why the heck isn't Kaiser White getting signed, right? Um, Even some lesser names, these guys who would be great veteran depth pieces that played significant snaps last year for teams, Neville Hewitt and Jawan Bentley. People, whether it's health or they have what they want or they got the depth to deal with anything, no one's picking up these veteran players who teams have cast aside for whatever reason. I don't know the exact reason. We can speculate, but what I can tell you is I have very little confidence that some team is going to come in, they're going to take this guy and they're going to put him into an 80% plus role.
Mhm.
And especially at this point, right? We're just about to hit preseason week 2. And then we look at him, he's only managed one season where he was a true like full-time linebacker as a starter, where he, actually got up over 1,000 snaps, or even that 900, 950 range. He struggled to get a couple, or I shouldn't say struggled, but he's had a couple seasons where he's gotten to that, near 800 mark. And again,
Mhm.
that's solid, but that's floating closer to that 75, 80% line, which when you're looking for some deeper plays at linebacker, you have deeper leagues. If you're starting 4, 5, 6, that might be helpful, but where he's getting drafted, like that is not okay.
Yeah,
And I
and
think the market
quickly,
will come.
I was just gonna mention, according to IDP Drafts Stats and Info department here, Jewell was cut on July 22nd.
There you
So it is almost a full month from, us sitting here talking about him being drafted in the 6th round of a recent draft.
yeah.
But sorry, go ahead, just wanted to.
No, that's great because that clarifies it and just makes it even more nuts to me. So,
Mhm,
worst case, if this is just the big PSA of the night, Jewell is not on a team and he's not looking like he's going to be on one anytime soon. Of course, now watch. We're going to air this on Wednesday or whenever, right? Or Friday this week. And he's going
mhm,
to be signed and it's going to be a full-time role, whatever.
mhm,
But I digress. Um, when I look then back at what's in that area, I know you're going to love this because I want to
mhm.
give some love to the big boys in the middle doing all the dirty work. The one, the only Sexy Dexy. I mean, when you look at a guy who's going right after that 67 mark in ADP, um, I really can't find a greater guy to put into my lineup or put onto my roster in a best ball format where I just feel good about what he's going to give me week in and week out. He delivers very solid tackle floor for the defensive interior. It's not anything outlandish. It's right around 6.5, 7% tackle efficiency. Um, I love what they've done there in New York in terms of building out that defense, especially the front four. I really do believe, hashtag foreshadowing, Abdul Carter is going to add a lot to that room. They have someone in a playmaker in Brian Burns. Thibodeau has underdelivered, but he still is. I mean, the guy ran out 900 snaps, I think, a couple of years ago, and
Mhm.
I mean, he's a strong body that can get out there, and maybe he'll be better in a more efficient role where he can be a designated pass rusher type thing. But regardless, all that's around Dexter Lawrence, he still gets to go and try and wreck things the way he did. Now, he did massively overperform last season in terms of his sacks, 10 on only 36 pressures. Like, that's nuts, man. Um, but you also look at the 5 seasons before that, he massively underperformed there, right? So he had 25 sacks when it should have been closer to, I think, 37, 38-ish.
Mm.
So maybe this is kind of that he's hitting his prime age for a pass rusher, right? We love to see pass rushers really hitting their stride in that, 25, 26, 27, right? Like they're these grown ass men just like mauling down there. And that's what he is right now. I'm not saying he's going to have another 10 sack season, but in place of a linebacker I have zero confidence in. I love a guy who's probably got a floor of 5 to 7 sacks and a strong tackle floor. That's going to be great for my defensive line rotation in terms of a best ball every single time. He's obviously a stud lock in defensive tackle required leagues. So hopefully I don't have to say that, but I'm going to because he deserves it. Yeah, I love me some Dexter Lawrence. Sorry, Josey Jewell. Maybe you'll get a job yet this year, but we'll wait and see.
Believe it or not, I cut Dexter Lawrence in a league tonight. So this makes me feel, it's a league that has 10 offensive starters and only 5 IDP starters,
Okay.
and they use DL designation. And I already
Mm.
have Nick Bosa, Will Anderson, and Micah Parsons. So someone had to go. I still hurt my heart to do it. So hearing you sing his praises and adulation is something that is already softening that wound for me. Because Lawrence is someone, back when I started the Professor IDP site and looking at defensive tackle streaming, he was rostered in such few leagues that he was a streaming option as recently as 2 years ago. That I was constantly out there saying, hey, this guy is underperforming, but he has all of the metrics. He's consistently getting snaps and high grades. So completely cosign on Dexter Lawrence over a wide variety of people that are being drafted in that area, not the least of which is Josey Jewell. But for my next pick, I'm going back to the linebacker well, and I'm fading Robert Spillane in favor of Azeez Al-Shaair. So their ADP is comparable. Spillane is being drafted at 40.5, and Al-Shaair is being drafted at 46.7. Spillane just has, I see these as relatively comparable players. Spillane has showed a little bit more of a ceiling in the past season and a half, 2 seasons than Al-Shaair in the past season and a half, 2 seasons. But you go back 3 years ago and you'll see an absolute stud year for Al-Shaair in Tennessee. So comparable ADP. The reason why I'm fading Spillane and ADP in favor of Al-Shaair is, again, just that uncertainty. So Spillane moved from Vegas to New England this offseason, and he got paid. He is going to be the middle linebacker in New England. So he's going to get the snaps. But I've been burned way too many times by that New England defense under a variety of coaching staffs and a variety of defensive coordinators who went on to be head coaches to not really trust them. I was able to go back over the last 5 seasons, and New England has had only one top 30 linebacker over the course of those 5 seasons, and it was Jelani Tavai, who finished as LB 30 in 2023, averaged 10.8 points per game. So Spillane, it was at a 14.7 points per game in 24. Al-Shaair was at 14.2. So a half a point difference between these guys. I see them as relatively comparable. One thing that did lead me to second guess this a little bit is the IDP After Show just wrapped up their previews for all the different divisions, and they did the AFC and NFC East this week. And Patrick, who you might know as Tackle Box Props, who is the best tackle prop person out there, highlighted Robert Spillane as someone who he is targeting in New England, like the only player other than maybe Harold Landry that he would target in New England. So that gave me a little bit of pause that I may be too low on Spillane. But for me, Al-Shaair just has stability. He's playing with the same defensive coordinator for the 3rd straight year. There is no uncertainty about who is the LB1 in Houston. There's plenty of different talk about who's going to be the LB2 and what that's going to look like. But Al-Shaair is the guy. I think comparable range of outcomes between these two. But given what we know about Al-Shaair in his current situation versus Spillane going into a new situation that hasn't been all that profitable, makes me lean Al-Shaair. And the last part of it that I will mention is, so when I was listening to Patrick talk, I was like, oh man, I may have made a mistake. I may have made a horrible mistake. But as he was describing things, he got to the point where he said, look at Vrabel in Tennessee and the output that he was able to get out of Azeez Al-Shaair. So if Vrabel is able to get that out of Spillane, then it's already Al-Shaair's production, and just give me the guy who did it in the first place. So I'm a bigger fan of Al-Shaair than Spillane. As a Texans fan, I hope you agree with me. And if not, I'll be reevaluating some things here momentarily. But what do you think of Azeez versus Spillane?
So I had both of them on like my home league team, right? Like my big one. And I actually ended up trading away Al-Shaair, but that was mostly contract reasons. It's a contract league. So I like them both this year. I really felt really good about Spillane in terms of his utilization because Vrabel's always had a dedicated LB1. So great usage because you talked about New England really just kind of screwing us over proverbially when it comes to IDP assets in the past. And I was like, well, that's yeah, because they'd be like, oh, this guy's our green dot this week or for the first 6 weeks, and he's getting 90% snaps. But now he looks like a better LB3 and he's getting 60% of the snaps all of a sudden. Like there's just this Bill Belichick always trying to galaxy brain everything, it felt like. And by extension, the rest of his coaching staff. But it's like, oh, okay, well, we should be good. Yeah, Vrabel's good. And I'm like, oh, who is their DC? Like, I had to look, and it's Terrell Williams, and he came from the Detroit Lions, and the Detroit Lions have given us some wonky stuff here with linebackers over the last few years too, with Anzalone and Derek Barnes and Jack Campbell. I was like, gosh darn it, did I just did I move off the wrong guy in my own league? Fandom be darned. Even like I was like, oh, so I got a little bit of pause, but eventually they did get to Jack Campbell being the guy by the end of this year, and maybe they'll have that with Spillane. So all that to say, I agree with you. Their values feel very comparable to me. I would really be comfortable with a coin flip in this situation. But since we're looking at fades and values, well, El Shair could be potentially six picks later, and it looks like it's near the end of a round in 46.7. So you could be talking about, well, let's take the chance and see if he falls to me there, and then maybe something, or maybe pass on him there, and maybe he'll come back around because the draft's just kind of flowing that way. So I think it's worth the shot to pass on Spillane for El Shair based on what we've talked about tonight.
Okay, so from two linebackers that we like both of, to one linebacker who, if he has a fan club, I'm amazed we haven't gotten hate mail from yet. Tell us why neither one of us are major fans of Patrick Queen and why you would go edge with Yaya Diaby instead.
I just couldn't. I just never got behind Patrick Queen, man. And all he did was, live off big plays, which were cool and they're great. And for NFL purposes, they serve a very real need. But for IDB purposes, I struggle to be excited about seeing Patrick Queen on my roster. This last year, even if it was a career, I should say, his career tackle rate is under 12% at 11.76. So, right, guy's been in the league for 4 years now, going on fifth year going on 6, and just can't get over a 12% tackle rate here. Last year, his career is 11.29. Last year was 11.76. So he bumped it up a half percentage over. So really, really wheels up. They're likely to stay in a very heavy man scheme, which our good friend John Macri over at PFF, as he always reminds us every offseason, is less friendly for our linebacker tackle stats. So I don't see a positive regression coming from that. He has mid-level pass rush opportunities, 79, which is also the second lowest of his career, I think, outside of his rookie season. So that was, if he's living on big plays and that's where he's been successful, and his PFF grades even support that, his pass rush grades always being some of the better part of his overall grades, they're just not using him like that. Well, he's in a scheme that's less conducive to tackle success. He's not being utilized in ways that maximize his talents. I just really don't know what there is to be excited about at this point. And then you tack in the fact that you got Peyton Wilson, albeit in a very small sample size because he didn't come until more significant snaps until the end of the year, but he graded out really well in coverage. And now all of a sudden, maybe Peyton Wilson midway through the season is the green dot because they want him on the field the entire time, and Patrick Queen becomes more of that designated specialist on the weak side for certain things, getting pulled off in third down situations or 2-minute drills. Okay, now we just lost 10, 12, 15 snaps for this guy, and he's already got a low tackle efficiency. That just sounds like a hard pass to me.
Yeah, and Wilson's being drafted a full round later than Queen, and I think he is very likely to usurp that role sooner rather than later. And I guess the one thing to be excited about Patrick Queen is passing on him for Yaya Diaby. So why do you like Yaya?
Yeah. I like this pick here. And I mean, it's as simple as this. We love to see year one to year two improvements for defensive linemen.
Mhm.
When we see that, it's generally the trend is established that there are people who are going to contribute for IDP for us, right? I There's plenty of samples. I apologize, I didn't pull enough of them, but to me, it's the growth, right? Like I'm happy with somewhere between like 4 to 8 points higher in PFF grades. It's like, okay, yes, this is the trend we want to see, and we can feel confident investing in this asset going forward. Um, Let me just take a look here. 13.5, 4.1, 18.5, and 18.5. What do those numbers mean? Those are the mark increase in his grades across defense, run defense, tackle, and 18.5 was for pass rush.
Dang. Yeah.
His pass rush pressure rate jumped from 8.87, so 1 out of every 12 snaps he's getting a pressure, to nearly 15% at 14.57. So now 1 in 8 he's getting a pressure. Um, Pressures obviously jumped up because of that. From 26 to 65 snaps, he's 515 to 785. He's he's moving in all the right directions. They're using him the right way. The only thing that dipped slightly was his tackle floor. But you know what? In this best ball format and the trajectory he's moving at, I feel confident that his sack floor is going to be well worth giving up the handful of tackles, maybe that is dipping in, his run game efficiency or things like that. Because that was his one grade that only went up 4 points, was his run defense. So, um, all that to say, I mean, how can you not be excited about this guy to the moon? Every game he had a minimum of 2 pressures. He also had 13 of his 17 games with 3+ pressures. So
Yeah.
again, we're talking 6 pressures to get a sack. But so I mean, you're saying basically every other game he's teed up for a sack. If you're just simple mathing this, I know that
Mhm.
obviously there's a lot more of variation that goes into each of those games and matchups and what have you. But I mean, yeah, like I said, that gives me a floor of 8, 9, 10 sacks in that range. I'm all on board for that, because if he takes another leap forward too, okay, now we're really taking off, especially here in at pick 67 in our best ball drafts.
And the other math part of it is you mentioned his run defense grade only went up by 4.1. His run defense grade as a rookie was already 68.2.
Yeah.
So that was the place where he had the least room for improvement. Now, granted, he had like massive leaps in other places, but it's not like he was someone who was in the 30s and went up to 37,
Right.
which still be improvement, still be good, still right direction. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Diaby, and my last play also dives into some of this same kind of idea of first versus second year leaps, and how we approach rookies versus second year players more broadly. And after singing his praises all year long, I'm gonna have to find a way to draft him next week, because it feels too weird to end on a low note of saying fade Abdul Carter. So love Abdul Carter. Well established if you're a longtime listener. If you're not, I love Abdul Carter. I've talked about him on, I think, 4 of our episodes this off season. The thing I don't love Abdul Carter is his ADP for this season. His ADP is 46.9. It was way higher in D up. I can't recall. At one point, it was in the 20s. I think it came down to earth and landed about in the 30s, but still, that's just insane to me. Um, that makes him edge 20. So he's being drafted as edge 20 right now. I believe that's in his range of outcomes. I think he may even be able to slightly exceed that and be a back end DL1. But this feels much more like you were talking about earlier, like a ceiling pick. We're drafting him very close to what his best possible outcome is in year one. We talked about a few episodes ago for the guys that we just keep drafting. I keep drafting Abdul Carter in my rookie drafts and in my dynasty leagues, because he is one of the 4 most prolific pass rushers to come out of college since 2020 in terms of posting back-to-back 90 plus PFF pass rush grades. The interesting thing about that is if you look at the other 3 names that are in that illustrious group and their rookie year fantasy performance, It's Leatu Latu, DL 90, Chop Robinson, DL 79, and Nik Bonnito, DL 244 in his rookie year. So, despite the fact that these guys had all the talent in the world, according to PFF, and consistent, not just one fluke year, back to back 90 plus pass rush seasons in college, none of them were able to light the world on fire in year one. Jared Verse had a phenomenal rookie year in 2024, and he still only finished as DL 24, which is which is lower than what we're drafting Carter at as DL 20. We've also talked about the fact that he has a less than ideal rotation. I like the landing spot long term, but short term, you were talking about Kayvon Thibodeau earlier. I love that he has big decks in the middle there to be a great pass rusher as well. But there's also Brian Burns, who is locked in as the edge one currently. So this reminds me in a lot of ways to the Dolphins situation last season, where they had Jalen Phillips, they had Bradley Chubb, and Chop Robinson, this incredibly talented edge rusher, also out of Penn State, was the third fiddle. And even when that group started to amass some injuries, it took Robinson a while to acclimate and really start to have that great production we saw at the end of the season out of him to salvage a DL 79 overall finish in 2024. So I love Carter long term. I just think we're overdoing it for this year. And I would much rather have Leatu Latu, whose ADP is 49.9, so only 3 picks away. If I was on the clock at pick 46, I would take Latu over Carter. Edge 22 feels like a pretty median range of outcomes for him. We're not drafting him at the ceiling. I think his floor is significantly higher than his DL 90 finish last year. And that's mainly because the cupboards are pretty bare in Indy. When Dayo Odengbo left, I think, to Chicago, he took 745 snaps with him, and they only backfill with JT Tuimalu, who is not going to be a significant threat to Latu's snap share. So he's going to play more by virtue of playing more. He's going to get more stats. I mentioned Jared Verse a moment ago. He gets all the praise that's deserved, but people tend to forget that Leatu Latu also finished as a top 30 overall graded edge in 2024. So he had a good rookie year, a top half of the league, enough to be a DE1 for most NFL rosters. And he's a guy that we can get at the same ADP who's going into year one, who we're hoping to get that improvement out of, who we believe has the talent and has a markedly better opportunity structure than he had going into last season. So love Abdul Carter. I hate saying this out loud, but for redraft, especially straight redraft, not just best ball where, everything, you might be able to convince yourself that Carter may have higher upside, but especially in redraft where you're setting a person in that lineup, I feel a lot more comfortable, especially the first half of the season, with that person being Latu. And I don't want to have to wait half a year to comfortably start someone like I could start Latu out of the gate.
Yeah, I was really just waiting for you to say I like Latu more than Abdul Carter, and for this season, whatever. But I just wanted to take that snippet. I wanted to cut it out and then memeify it, right? And see, look at this. This guy doesn't like Carter. I've been trying to tell you. No, I mean it. Yeah, I talked about the rotation stuff and snaps, and to me the biggest thing is when we've seen edges succeed in year one for fantasy purposes, it's almost always embedded with 850 plus snaps, right? Or somewhere in that range. We've seen Hutch do it. We saw Verse do it. And I think you spelled it beautifully, right? Yeah, they were successful as rookies, but they weren't top 20 successful, right? Or they were very close to that. And that's not a common occurrence, right? I get Abdul Carter does look special. He looks legit. Especially you start seeing some of these camp hype videos, right, where he is just one step cutting and back inside, and it's like he is touching the quarterback on the shoulder in 2.25 seconds. You're like, wow, okay, yeah, maybe I should have traded up into the first round to take Abdul Carter in my rookie draft. But you know what? Um, for redraft and for best ball though, I don't know that we're going to get there, because even as many highlights as he does give us this season, I just don't know that he's going to have the volume to give us enough to justify this cost that we're talking about here tonight.
Mm-hmm.
So, well, with that, we have given you guys 10 fades based on our IDP draft data here over at the IDP show. This isn't the only draft we do, though, because Scott and I, we love doing everyone's favorite kind of draft, and that is a combined best ball, right? So we're talking offense, we're talking defense, and we have number 7 all queued up. I know we've got a group of drafters, like there's a core of them out there that are like just always chomping at the bit, and they're such great guys to draft with. So if you guys listen to this, thank you for that. But we've also been able to sprinkle in new people each time too, and so it's great. Hope to do that. Maybe we can get crazy and get another one in here yet somehow. We'll see. But we got 7 queued up and ready to go. We're gonna get that information out to you guys. Please, please, please jump in with us right away. Have some fun, chop it up with us. You guys are great as always. But beyond just drafting with us, there's plenty of other things you can do. And if you want to find out more about them, just visit theidpshow.com. You're going to get everything you need from managed leagues, best balls, dynasty, rankings, insights, fades. Well, I mean, there's so many things that you can get here that we talk about in our shows, but we give it to you in written content. There are videos that can be rewatched there. There's a lot of great free content, but there's also so much more that can be unlocked if you want to become a member with the idpshow.com. I am so bad. I always forget. I'm pretty sure it's $50 a year. I know it's $5 a month if you do a monthly charge, but either way, that's such a good cost. Definitely need to check it out. Get your information there, and hopefully you can dominate leagues, even ones that you play with me and Scott. As long as I beat Scott, I'm happy, right? So I should be playing for first, but I'm just playing for better than Scott at this point.
So 2 things I'll mention about the stuff that you can find on that site. First, all this ADP that we've been talking about, you can see it if you have a subscription to the site. Not only can you see it, you can make a copy and you can look at only the most 5 recent drafts, or you can cut it up however you want to cut it up to inform what you're going to be doing. And that's available to paid members over there. And the other thing that I just feel I'd be remiss if I didn't shout out, especially this time of the year, is Jeff Palmazal's IDP minutes. So there is so much news that happens every single day. I was in Copenhagen 2 weeks ago. I was in Western Pennsylvania and then Canton last week. So there was so much news that I was missing, but I took a minute out of each day to go on Twitter and look up Jeff's IDP minute clips yes, because they are just a phenomenal source of IDP news for you. So be sure to definitely check those out. And then Jake and I will be returning in 2 weeks for our final episode of IDP drafts this offseason. And we're going to end it with the most appropriate way to end a season of IDP drafts, and that's with a live draft. So not just 4 rounds of when we think IDP are going to go. We're going to try to do a draft from start to finish. It's going to be a great format. It's a best ball format. It's going to have offense and IDP. Fast draft, if you're listening, underdog, if you're listening, a startup company, if you're listening, this is a format that we absolutely love. We've been doing them off season and it's been just a blast. So we'll be sharing one live with you so you can see how one unfolds in real time. And even if you're not with a big company listening and trying to think of new revenue streams, which these would absolutely be, if you just want to make a league with your buddies who haven't done IDP before, you're trying to convince people to add IDP to your fantasy league, a best ball draft is a great way to do that. And anytime you want, you can do one of these with us, or you can ask us for the settings, or you'll be able to just show them our next episode and say, hey, look how much fun this is. Let's do it. Let's make that leap. So for Jake, I'm Scott. And until our next episode, we will see you all in the drafts.